And welcome to Sex 101. Sex 101 is created to empower our sexes and, of course, our relationships. Another week, another great episode. The architecture of protection. Why ancient authority is the key to modern flourishing.
Well, the Catholic Gentleman produced an episode about how men are protectors, which was the inspiration for this reflection. In our current cultural wasteland, modern romance has become a ghost of its former self, leaving us with what the Righteous Brothers famously captured in 1965 as an unchained melody. We possess lonely rivers kind of longing, a deep neurological ache for connection, but we have lost the banks that give the river its direction and safety. In the laboratory of the 21st century, we've replaced the covenantal architecture of the sanctuary with a fragile transactional contract, resulting in a state of chronic relational dysregulation. As the ante-Nicene fathers understood, the sovereign self cannot find peace in a vacuum. It requires a secure base. By recovering the ancient blueprint of male authority and protection, we move beyond the contemporary fruitless searching and into a love in the ruins, where authority is not a power play, but a haven that allows the restless heart to rest.
Indeed, interesting topic, Mr. Mick. We're living in a cultural moment where the very concept of male authority in relationships feel almost taboo. Yet, you're arguing that the early Christianity had something profound to say about this. Where do we even begin, Mr. Meg?
Well, it's fascinating because you actually read the early Christian texts not through the lens of modern politics, but as historical documents written in real communities facing real challenges. You discover something surprising. These writers weren't proposing some arbitrary power structure. They were articulating a vision of male authority that's fundamentally about sacrificial service, not domination. And here's what's remarkable: this vision didn't emerge in a vacuum. It was revolutionary precisely because it transformed the Roman understanding of authority into something radically different. Let me take you to Ephesians chapter 5, probably written about 60 AD. Paul writes, "Husband, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." Now, to modern ears, that might sound like generic marriage advice, but imagine hearing this in first century. Roman paterfamilias, the male head of household, had legal authority to execute members of his own family. His power was absolute. Then along comes this Christian teacher saying, yes, you have authority, but it must look like Christ dying on a cross for those he loves. That's not power as the Roman world understood it. That's power turned inside out, transformed into self donation. The Catholic Gentleman podcast makes this point beautifully in their discussion of the husband's authority. They argue that male authority in the family is fundamentally protective, not oppressive. The husband's leadership exists to create space where his wife and children can flourish. And when you trace this idea back through early Christian literature, you find it everywhere. Take Clement of Alexandria, writing about 195 AD in his work The Instructor. He describes the Christian husband as one who rules his household well, having his children in submission with all gravity. But pay attention to what follows. He immediately connects this to gentleness, self control, and the pursuit of virtue. Authority without virtue isn't Christian authority at all. It's just tyranny wearing religious clothes. Or consider John Chrysostom, the golden mouthed preacher of 4th century Constantinople. In his homilies on Ephesians, he tells husbands, do you want your wife to obey you as the church obeys Christ? Then take care of her as Christ takes care of the church, even if you must give your life for her, even if you must be torn apart 1,000 times, even if you must endure and undergo anything whatsoever. Do not refuse it. This is authority defined entirely by sacrifice. The husband's headship means he stands first in a line of fire, first to suffer, first to give up his own interest. Now, why does this matter for modern relationships? Because we've lost the connection between authority and responsibility. In contemporary culture, we tend to think of authority as privilege, the right to make decisions, to have one's way. But in the early Christian vision, authority is a burden. It's a call to carry the weight so others don't have to. The husband who understands this doesn't grasp for control, he shoulders responsibility. He protects his family's physical safety, yes, but also their emotional well being, their spiritual health, their capacity to become fully who they're meant to be. And here's the psychological insight that modern research confirms: people flourish when they have both freedom and security. Women aren't asking for domineering husbands who micromanage their lives. However, study after study shows that women report higher relationship satisfaction when their partners demonstrate competent leadership, when they make decisions confidently, provide stability, and create an environment where she feels protected and valued. The general social science data from 2018 showed that couples with more traditional gender role divisions reported higher levels of relationship satisfaction than egalitarian couples, though the difference was complex and mediated by many factors. What matters isn't the specific division of labor, but whether both partners feel the arrangement honors their deepest needs and contributions. The early Christians understood something profound. Complementarity isn't oppression. Men and women aren't identical in their needs, their strengths, or their callings. And a marriage that honors these differences, where the husband provides protective leadership and the wife offers her unique gifts in response, creates something beautiful. Not because one is superior to the other, but because their differences are designed to fit together. In conclusion, when we recover the early Christian vision of male authority as sacrificial protection, we discover a framework that's neither patriarchal domination nor undifferentiated egalitarianism, but something far more compelling and humane.
So, Mr. Mac, you established this foundation of authority as service, but practically speaking, what does protective male leadership actually look like? The Catholic Gentleman podcast identifies four specific ways men are called to protect. Can you walk us through this?
This is where the rubber meets the road. The Catholic gentleman identifies four dimensions of masculine protection: physical protection, emotional protection, spiritual protection, and protection through self mastery. Each of these has deep roots in early Christian thought, and together they form a comprehensive vision of what it means to be both a husband and father. Let's start with physical protection, which is the most obvious but also the most foundational. From the earliest biblical texts, men are portrayed as defenders. In Genesis 2, before the fall, Adam is placed in the garden to work it and keep it. That Hebrew word for keep, shamar, is the same word used for a watchman guarding a city. Adam wasn't just a gardener, he was a guardian. His vocation from the very beginning included vigilant protection. This theme continues throughout Scripture and into early Christian writing. Tertullian, writing about 200 AD in North Africa, describes the Christian husband as one who fights for his family, both literally and figuratively. In a world where persecution, banditry, and violence were genuine threats, the expectation that a man would physically defend his household wasn't metaphorical, it was survival. But here's what's crucial for our modern context: physical protection isn't primarily about fighting off attackers, though that capacity matters. It's about treating an environment of safety. It's the husband who checks the strange noise at night. It's the father who walks between his children and traffic. It's the man who ensures the car is maintained, the hope is a home is secure, the finances are managed that his family isn't vulnerable to disaster. Physical protection is about anticipating threats and positioning yourself between danger and the people you love. Contemporary psychology backs this up in fascinating ways. Research on relationship attachment shows that women's nervous systems literally calm when they perceive their partners as strong and capable protectors. This isn't cultural conditioning, it's neurobiological. Dr. Sue Johnson, the founder of emotionally focused therapy, describes how women's stress hormones decrease when they feel securely connected to a partner they trust to have their back. The husband who provides this kind of safety isn't being paternalistic, he's responding to a deep human need. The second dimension is emotional protection, and this is where many modern men stumble. Augustine of Hippo, writing in the early 5th century, understood that emotional safety is just as vital as physical safety. In his Confessions, he describes the Christian life as learning to love rightly, to protect not just bodies but hearts. The emotions of the husband's protection means creating a space where his wife can be vulnerable without fear of mockery, manipulation, or abandonment. The Catholic Gentleman podcast emphasizes this beautifully. Emotional protection means the husband guards his wife's dignity, especially in public. He doesn't make her the butt of jokes. He doesn't belittle her in front of friends or family. He doesn't use her insecurity as weapons during arguments. Instead, he builds her up. He celebrates her strengths. He creates an emotional climate where she knows her feelings are honored, her concerns are taken seriously, and her well being matters more than his ego. Chrysostom again: he who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own body, but he nourishes and tenderly cares for it, just as Christ does for the church. Emotional protection is this nourishment. It's daily kindness, consistent affirmation, and patient listening. It's the recognition that your wife's emotional state directly impacts the entire household, and therefore, protecting her peace is protecting everyone. Third is spiritual protection, which the early church fathers understood as the highest form of masculine responsibility. Origen of Alexandria, writing in the 3rd century, taught that the Christian husband is responsible not just for his wife's comfort, but for her soul. He should encourage her in prayer, support her spiritual growth, model virtue, and ensure the household is oriented toward God. This doesn't mean spiritual domination, quite the opposite. It means the husband takes responsibility for creating a home where faith can flourish. He leads family prayer not because his prayers are worth more, but because someone needs to initiate and he's willing to shoulder that responsibility. He makes decisions about church involvement, charitable giving, and moral education, not unilaterally, but with the awareness that he'll answer for how he stewarded these crucial matters. The book of Proverbs, chapter 31, gives us that famous description of the wife of noble character. But notice who praises her. Her husband praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. The husband's role includes recognizing and celebrating his wife's spiritual excellence. He provides her and protects her spiritual life by making space for it, honoring it, and refusing to let the demands of the world crowd it out. And finally, protection through self mastery. This might be the most countercultural element for contemporary men. The Stoic philosophers understood this, and the early Christians baptized their insights. Epictetus taught that a man who cannot control himself cannot be trusted over with authority over others. The Christian fathers went further. They taught that self-mastery isn't just practical wisdom, it's holiness. Clement of Alexandria devoted large sections of the Instructor to teaching Christian men how to master their appetites: food, drink, sexuality, anger, and greed. Why? Because an undisciplined man is dangerous. A husband who can't control his temper will emotionally abuse his family. A father who can't resist immediate gratification will impoverish his children. A man enslaved to pornography, drunkenness, or workaholism cannot protect anyone because he's already been conquered by his own passions. The Catholic gentleman makes this point powerfully. The man who would protect others must first protect himself from himself. He must cultivate virtue. He must practice temperance. He must develop the self awareness to recognize when his ego, his lust, his pride, and his fear is driving his decisions rather than love for his family. In conclusion, these four dimensions, physical, emotional, spiritual, and self mastery, aren't separate categories but interconnected aspects of a unified vocation: the call to be a man who makes space for life to flourish under his care.
Mr. Mick, you painted a compelling picture of individual family life, but I'm curious about bigger claim here that marriages built on the complementary sex differences actually create civilization itself. That's a bold argument. What is the historical and sociological evidence?
It's bold, but it's also demonstrably true when you look at the historical record. Every civilization that has endured has built itself on the foundation of stable, complementary marriages. And every civilization that has weakened that foundation has eventually collapsed or declined. This isn't religious propaganda, it's observable social science confirmed by millennia of human experience. Let me start with this basic sociological insight. Civilization requires delayed gratification. long term planning, and the channeling of male aggression toward productive ends. J.D. Unwin's 1934 study, Sex and Culture, examined 86 different societies across history and found an unmistakable pattern. Societies that maintain strict monogamous marriage customs and clearly defined sex roles experience periods of explosive cultural achievement, art, architecture, philosophy, and scientific advancement. Societies that abandon these customs experience decline within 3 generations. Unwin himself was an atheist with no religious axe to grind. He was simply reporting what the data showed. Why does this happen? Because marriage civilizes men. The anthropologist Joseph Henrich, in his book, The Weirdest People in the World, explains how the Christian church's insistence on monogamous marriage fundamentally transformed Western civilization. When you tell a young man that he can have one wife, that he must commit to her for life, and that he must provide and protect for his family, you're challenging his energies toward productivity. He's no longer competing for multiple sexual partners or asserting dominance through violence. Instead, he's building a business, cultivating land, creating stability, because that's how he attracts and keeps a wife and supports his children. The early church understood this intuitively. Augustine writes in The City of God about how Christian marriage created a fundamentally different social order than the Roman system. Roman men of means could have wives, concubines, and slaves for sexual use. Christianity said this was misleading, and you embrace one woman, lifelong commitment, and mutual fidelity. These weren't repression, it was the creation of the conditions for trust, stability, and multi generational planning. And here's where the complementary piece becomes crucial. When men and women have defined honored roles within the family becomes a powerful engine of civilization building. The husband protects and provides, using his typically greater physical strength and his psychological orientation towards status, competition, and resource acquisition. The church and wife nurtures and organizes the household, using her typically greater emotional intelligence and relational skills to create a stable home environment. Together, they create something neither could create alone, a multi generational enterprise invested in the future. The Hebrew scriptures gives us beautiful examples of this. Proverbs 31 again, while the husband sits at the city gates engaging in governance and commerce, the noble wife manages an entire household economy. She buys fields, plants vineyards, makes clothing to sell, and ensures her husband is clothed and fed. This isn't oppression. It's a powerful division of labor where both partners exercise agency in their domains and create prosperity together. Her work is as essential as his, but it's different, and the difference is productive. Contemporary research confirms this pattern. Harvard sociologist Robert Putnam documented in Our Kids how the collapse of stable two parent families has created devastating inequality in America. Children from intact families with married parents have enormous advantages in educational achievement, emotional stability, and the economic opportunity. Children from fragmented families face massive disadvantages. The divide is now a stronger predictor of life outcomes than a race or economic class at birth. But not all marriages are equally effective at producing these outcomes. Research by W. Bradford Wilcox and others has shown that marriages characterized by clear, divine, or different role differentiation and higher male income contribution tend to be more stable and repeat higher satisfaction than marriages with completely undifferentiated roles. This doesn't mean women shouldn't work outside the home. Many do successfully. But it suggests that when couples can afford some degree of specialization, and when that specialization roughly requires traditional patterns with the husband as its primary provider and protector, both the marriage and the children tend to survive. Why? Because this arrangement aligns with deep psychological needs. Women's mate preferences across cultures consistently emphasize men's ability to provide resources and protection. Men's mate preferences consistently emphasize women's nurturing capacity. These aren't arbitrary social constructions. They've evolved through thousands of years, and when psychology is now reaffirming what we see historically. When marriages honor rather than fight against these deep preferences, they work better. There's also a theological truth here that the early Christians grasped. The family is a microcosm of the church, which is a microcosm of the kingdom of God. Just compare marriage to Christ and the church randomly, it's revealing something about the structure of reality. Order, hierarchy, complementary roles, sacrificial love. These aren't arbitrary impositions, they're reflections of how God designed human flourishing. Basil of Caesarea, writing in the 4th century, understood that strong Christian families were the building blocks of Christian civilization. In his long rules, he described the family as a little church where children first learn about God, authority, obedience, love, and sacrifice. Its families fail to form virtue. The church fails. If the church fails, our society collapses into chaos. The family is primary. And we're watching this play out in real time. Western societies have spent the last 60 years conducting a massive experiment. What happens when you separate sex from marriage, marriage from childbearing, and family structure with any normative ideal? The results are in. We have skyrocketed rates of loneliness, depression, addiction, and suicide. We have boys failing in school and making withdrawing from social life. We have girls reporting unprecedented levels of anxiety and self harm. We have plummeting birth rates and collapsing community institutions. We have political polarization and cultural fragmentation. None of this is coincidental. When you deconstruct the family, you deconstruct everything built upon it. The early Christians knew what we're rehearsing the bad way, the hard way. Complementary, stable, and sacrificial marriages don't just make individuals happy, though they do that. They make civilization possible. In conclusion, the link between family structure and societal flourishing isn't incidental but foundational, a truth the early Christians proclaimed and which our contemporary crisis confirms through painful experience.
Very well said, Mr. Mick. And you made a historical and sociological case. But as we wrap, I imagine some listeners are thinking that's all we good for ancient societies. But modern women don't want to be protected. They want equality, independence, autonomy. How do you respond to that?
It's such an important question, and it requires us to distinguish between contemporary ideology says women should want and what the actual psychological and relationship research tells us about what contributes to women's well being and satisfaction. And here's what's fascinating: when you look at what actually predicts women's happiness in relationship, you find patterns that look remarkably similar to what the early Christian writers prescribed. Let's start with the autonomy question. Yes, women want autonomy, but so do men. Autonomy is a basic human need confirmed by self determination theory, one of the most robust frameworks in modern psychology. But here's the crucial insight: autonomy doesn't mean isolation or complete independence. It means the ability to make authentic choices aligned with your values. And for many women, the authentic choice includes choosing to be in a relationship with a man who provides protection and leadership. The psychologist Helen Fisher has done extensive research on mate selection across cultures. Her findings are striking. Women consistently rate qualities like ambition, intelligence, financial prospects, and the willingness to commit as highly attractive to potential partners. These preferences aren't culturally imposed, they show up across wildly different societies, from hunter gatherer tribes to modern industrial nations. Women are attracted to men who can provide and protect. This doesn't mean women are weak or dependent, it makes them wise. A woman who chooses a partner capable of protection is exercising rational choice based on both immediate and long term well being. Now, does this mean women want domineering, controlling partners? Absolutely not. And this is where we need to return to the early Christian vision. The protection and leadership these writers described is nothing like control or domination. Chrysostom says explicitly, do not act the despot, nor regard her as a slave, but as a fellow heir to the grace of life. The husband's authority is exercised in service of his wife's flourishing, not in opposition to it. Contemporary research on relationship satisfaction backs this up. Dr. John Gottman, who has studied thousands of couples over decades, found that they are the happiest marriages are characterized by what he calls the positive sentiment override, a general atmosphere of fondness, imagination, and respect. With that context, women reported high satisfaction when their husbands demonstrated competence, made decisions confidently, and took initiative to solve problems. But this only worked when combined with emotional responsiveness and respect for the wife's input. In other words, women aren't attracted to weakness or passivity in men, but they're also repelled by arrogance and disrespect. What works is strength tempered by love, exactly what Ephesians 5 prescribes. The husband who loves his wife as Christ loved the church is strong enough to lead her, but gentle enough to serve. This makes her his decisions, but he consults her wisdom. He protects her, but he doesn't infantilize her. He makes her responsible, but he honors her agency. There's also neurobiological evidence here that's fascinating. Research on women's stress response systems shows that feeling protected by a trusted partner literally changes brain chemistry. When women perceive their partners as strong and reliable, their cortisol levels drop, their oxytocin levels rise, and their overall nervous system regulation improves. This isn't about dependency, it's about the profound relief that comes from your not knowing to be hypervigilant all the time, from knowing someone capable has your back. Dr. Sue Johnson's work on attachment in adult relationships confirms this. Women form non attachment and secure attachments to partners who are emotionally accessible, responsive, and engaged, what Johnson calls ARE. But within that framework, women also to perceive their patterns as strong. A woman who emotionally available but incompetent or passive doesn't create secure attachment. Women need both the strength that creates safety and the tenderness that creates connection. The wisdom literature of Scripture understood this balance perfectly. The Song of Solomon, that beautiful celebration of marital love, describes the bridegroom as both powerful, my beloved is as like a gazelle or a young stag, and tender. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. Power and gentleness, strength and affection, protection and intimacy. This is what draws the bride, not domination, not passivity, but masculine strength in service of love. And here's what's tragic about contemporary confusion on this topic. We've created a cultural script that tells women they shouldn't want or need their protection. Delivering a strong husband is somehow anti feminist or regressive. But this script conflicts deeply with deep psychological and biological realities. So women end up feeling guilty about their own desires, and they suppress those desires and choose partners that are safe, but ultimately unsatisfying because they lack that masculine strength. Research on household labor division shows that couples with more traditional divisions, where women do more domestic work and men do more paid work, actually report higher sexual satisfaction than couples with perfectly equal divisions. Again, this doesn't mean mere equality is bad or that egalitarian messages can't work, but it suggests that complementary, not sameness, creates attraction and satisfaction. Gregory of Nazianzus, writing in the 4th century, puts it beautifully. He described the ideal Christian marriage as one where each contributes what the other lacks. The husband contributes his strength, his protection, his provision. The wife contributes her wisdom, her nurture, her social environment. Together, they create something whole. Neither is complex without the other. Neither is superior, but neither are the identical, and that difference is what makes them union powerful. In conclusion, when we align our relationship structures with actual psychological needs rather than ideological prescriptions, we discover that women's desire for strong, protective husbands isn't weakness, but wisdom, a recognition of the complementarity that both partners can enjoy.
Mr. Meg, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. Modern society often celebrates autonomy, disruption, and rejection of tradition. Authority is frequently viewed with suspicion, as though inherited wisdom is obstacle to progress. Mr. Meg, would you like to plug in something?
I appreciate the opportunity. Write the book, grow the business. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You make the Doctor of Digital Smith and listen to the Doctor of Digital podcast and pick up a couple of volumes I have on Amazon. That's Burning America and On Track in Mind.
Yes, people, let's go, Mr. Ming, the Doctor of Digital, and please do listen to our other podcasts, Music 101, Sex 101, and of course, our Mental Health 101. So please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast, and of course, our love letters. So, Mr. Ming, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, my friend. Till next time, Deus Volt.
More to come, people. See you soon. Okay, Mr. Man.